Hi there, I'm Gregory Geffen,
And I am Benjamin Werber.
and we are the Geffen-Werber Law Group.
Along with our title company, Signature Title, we are for more than 2 decades your Florida real estate and title closing attorneys.
This is our video series where we break down some of the hottest topics and frequently asked questions to tell you what you need to know.
Today, we are going to focus on the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, better known as FIRPTA.
If you deal with foreign nationals in your practice, you're going to want to pay close attention to this because there's some things that you need to know early on to make your transaction go smoothly. So listen up. First, the basics. What is FIRPTA? Simply stated, for many transactions involving a foreign seller, the Internal Revenue Code requires that 10 to 15% of the gross sales proceeds must be remitted to the IRS within 20 days of the closing.
So the first thing to understand is that FIRPTA is not a tax. It is merely a withholding. In this case, Uncle Sam has decided they are not in the business of chasing foreign nationals around the globe to collect the tax on any gains made on the sale of real property. The foreign seller will need to obtain a U.S. tax ID number and apply for a refund by filing a return on the gain or loss on the property.
Keep in mind that the ascertainment of the seller's foreign status and submission of the withholding is technically the buyer's responsibility, and penalties for failure are often assessed against the buyer. As such, this task is sourced to us as the closing agent. What we'll do in these instances is connect your client with a local CPA who specializes in working with foreign nationals to guide them through the process of filing the paperwork and getting a refund.
Here are a few misconceptions that people have. We are often asked, after closing costs and commissions, my client is selling the property for less than what he paid for it. A loss. Do we still need to comply with FIRPTA? The answer is yes. Remember, FIRPTA is not a tax. It is a withholding requirement. The fact that it may be obvious your client is taking a de facto loss on the property does not obviate withholding, even if this means your client has to come up with the cash at the table to cover the shortage, in the case where they are underwater because of a mortgage.
The next misunderstanding we'll often have is somebody will say, my client's a non-US citizen, but he or she may already have a US tax ID or social security number. Does this mean that we don't have to deal with FIRPTA? No, not necessarily. Many foreign sellers may already have a tax ID number for a myriad of reasons, but that alone doesn't mean that we're free to ignore FIRPTA. They're only exempt from withholding if they meet what is considered to be a U.S. taxpayer as defined by the Internal Revenue Code and meet what is known as the substantial presence test and can execute what's commonly referred to as seller's non-foreign certificate at closing. This is something to go over and be determined by a local CPA with expertise in this area. Otherwise, and unless the transaction itself is exempt, which we'll get to in a minute, withholding is required.
Now, let's talk about the exemptions, the cases where the seller is a foreign national, but the transaction is exempt from withholding. This is the area that causes the most confusion. Transactions where the gross sales price is less than $300,000. Most people in real estate are aware that many transactions that are less than $300,000 are exempt from FIRPTA withholding. But please understand a couple of things. First, the exemption is not automatic. A few criteria must be met. The IRS rules mandate that for the transaction to be exempt, the buyer must be purchasing the property as a home for their personal use and have definite plans to reside at the property for at least 50% of the number of days the property is used during each of the first 2 12-month periods following the date of transfer.
That last part, 50% of the number of days used, is often confusing to buyers, who often see the terms use and 50% and conflate this with the requirements of establishing residency in Florida and think that we're talking about 181 days. That's not the case, as the IRS specifically advises that we do not count the number of days that the property will be vacant. So basically, that means that so long as the property is not investment property for rental or a flip, and the buyer is going to use it for their personal use, It doesn't matter if it's a second home or they're only going to use a few months a year or even a few weeks a year.
So the way this works is that in order to recognize this exemption, we, as the title company, would need to obtain what's called a residency certificate, where the buyer attests that the withholding is exempt as they have the intention to occupy the property within the parameters we just discussed.
Now here's where this gets tricky, and this is very important, in that there's nothing in the contract that requires the buyer to sign the certificate form. If the buyer's not comfortable or unsure, they can't be forced to sign the exemption form once you're in contract, and this has been dealt with in advance. So if you're a foreign seller, or if you have a foreign seller for a property that may qualify for the exemption, and obtaining this exemption is important to them, this must be dealt with at the contractual level by adding language to the contract where the parties stipulate that the buyer is buying the property for their use and agrees to execute the required certifications.
As always, feel free to touch base with us and we can provide this language to you.
So, with a little proactivity on the front end and the right advice, foreign sellers should not have to fear this FIRPTA withholding or be taken surprise at the closing table.
As always, please feel free to call us with any questions or to assist your clients.
I'm Gregory Geffen,
And I'm Benjamin Werber.
and this has been What You Need to Know. We sure hope you enjoyed this video presentation. For more of these on a wide range of topics, please subscribe or visit our YouTube channel, visit our website, or find us on any of the various social media online.